Kansas and Missouri have always had a contentious relationship, but now it's been kicked up a notch. The Chiefs' announced move to the Sunflower State may have sealed the fate of a working relationship that stood for years. First off, it's good to know how we got here.
That's important for Missouri and Kansas both, but more importantly, it's better for Kansas City.
Let's go back to 2019 when then Missouri Governor Mike Parson joined Kansas Governor Laura Kelly, calling a truce to the border war battle between our two states. Both leaders signed agreements limiting the use of state incentives, encouraging businesses to jump the state line. Though 3 years later, Governor Kelly made an important distinction when asked if she'd want the Chiefs in Kansas.
I would be all for it, obviously. When I signed the border war truce with Missouri, it didn't include the Chiefs.
Not long after that, the wheels really started turning. In 2022, sports betting went live in Kansas, setting aside money to attract professional sports teams like the Chiefs and Royals. In April 2024, Jackson County, Missouri voters shot down plans for a new Royals ballpark and renovations at Arrowhead. Kansas lawmakers passed their big Star Bonds deal 2 months later, hoping to use public funding through sales tax revenue to lure the teams. And a year after that, Missouri's governor called a special session and lawmakers passed their own stadium incentive deal. By the way, their side of the border war truce deal ran out in August. We all know what happened next. The Chiefs agreed to leave their home of more than 50 years to build a new multi-billion-dollar stadium, training complex, and headquarters in Kansas, something Governor Kelly hopes Missourians will eventually see as a positive.
This is really in everybody's best interest in the Kansas City metro area and even beyond. The Chiefs will be here. Now we know they will be here for another 50, 60 years.
Needless to say, this major move by the state of Kansas, along with other companies like Lockton moving there thanks to local incentives, have leaders looking at this interstate relationship in a different light.
I think this is something that we'll have to live in and with. And as part of that, we're going to make sure we compete like hell for all the best businesses for Kansas City, for every entity that might be in this area or beyond for Kansas City long term.
A number of Missouri lawmakers didn't mince words, essentially saying the gloves are off from here on out and a truce wouldn't be renewed. Republican State Senator Nick Schroer, the chairman of the Missouri Freedom Caucus, wrote on social media, "I will be getting rid of the asinine handshake border war resolution, which says we will play nice with our neighbors next door." He's even pitching a plan to prevent large sports teams from using any tax credits. Let's get to the heart of what's happening and discuss this year's session with Missouri House Speaker John Patterson. Welcome. Great to have you on. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
There's a lot to consider this session, but I have to ask you first, with the Chiefs moving to Kansas, that big announcement, do you feel that the truce is essentially off and the border war's back on?
I think obviously with what you've seen, there really wasn't a truce, and if you can't have a truce about the biggest sports team in the area, it probably didn't exist. And so I don't think we should be emotional about it, but I think every state has a right to try to get things that benefit the state, and I think that's what you're seeing on both sides. And I get the emotion of some of the other legislators, but I think states need to do what's best for them, and I think that's what you'll see going forward.
So a truce in name only is kind of,
I think that's kind of what you had.
Yeah, as we said, Missouri's side of that expired in August, and again, that was a year plus after the Star Bonds deal in Kansas. Would you even consider renewing anything on paper that said, hey, we're going to play nicely, there's a truce?
Well, I've already been clear, I don't think we're going to pursue that legislation, so I just don't think it'll happen.
Mm-hmm. We've seen other moves not made by the state, like the city of Leawood attracting Lockton, and we've seen other non-state incentives go out try to lure companies across the state line. Not the Royals yet. We'll see what happens. But would you put any bills into motion discouraging counties, cities, and towns from trying to supersede, I guess, state talks, that sort of thing, and bring companies over?
No, I don't think we should be micromanaging the cities and municipalities. I think the best thing we can do is focus on the fundamentals of being a great state, which is safe neighborhoods, public safety, good roads, good education, having neighborhoods, having homes that people can afford, having a tax situation that's fair to taxpayers. Those are the kind of things that I think we can work on as a state that attracts people and makes people want to live here. Let's
talk about it a little bit. We're just a few days into the new session now. What are the biggest priorities on your docket? What do you want to put up for a vote this session?
Well, I think we've been very clear. We want to address income taxes. And of course, this time of year when people have just gotten done paying their personal property and property taxes, I think that's still a major issue in Jackson County and across the state. And so I think as we get to Jeff City, we're going to get to work right away on those issues.
The biggest question that I've heard from critics about, I mean, everybody would like to pay fewer taxes, right?
Right.
You and me, everybody. But the biggest criticism that I've heard is how are we going to find a way to pay for it? I know last year Missouri lawmakers cut the capital gains tax. Recent state budget projections show that revenue will likely be some $400 million below estimates a little more than a year ago. How do you push forward in what could be considered a difficult budget year? I guess, where's the balance?
Absolutely, and nobody's saying you're not going to pay taxes, and nobody's saying we're not going to fund our government and take care of the things that we need to take care of as a state. The thing that we're asking is, since the 1930s, we've had our tax system, and back then we were driving Studebakers, and today we have self-driving cars. Is that tax system that we had in 1930 the way we want to be taxed in the future? And with people being able to live wherever they want to live these days with work from home, one of the things that people think about is how they are taxed. And so can we make a tax structure that still funds our government but is more attractive for people to come and live and work? And the current model of go to work, get taxed on your earnings, come home, get taxed on what you own, is that the system that we want, or is there something better?
Do you support getting rid of personal property tax?
I think the first thing we can do is to reduce it, and when we have legislation already filed that would reduce personal property taxes. I would love to see them go away, but I think the first thing we can start with is reducing them. And you know, people's cars, their values went way up during COVID, and so I think we're still paying more than what we should. I think we could get it down to a level that is more in line with a normal inflationary rates instead of with what we have been paying.
You mentioned you're not saying that you don't want people to pay taxes, but the governor doesn't want people to pay income tax. You've had conversations with him. How would a phase out work, and do you think you'd have the support to pass it?
Well, I think, like I've said, the government needs money to function. We need to take care of our state, and there are things that the government has to do. We have to fund our schools. The current model, though, is that the way we want to do it? I think it's an inefficient way to do it. I think taxing people on what they earn is one of the ways that could be improved. And so that's the question that we'll be asking. We're not going to be getting rid of state government, getting rid of taxes completely. It's just how we're going to do it.
All right, we'll be watching closely. Speaker John Patterson, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
KMBC 9 News and Heart of the Matter will be keeping a close eye on the bills making their way through Jeff City and what they mean for you. Look for updates on air and online at KMBC.com.